Peace be with you, and welcome to Some Shit Communication Presents Express Yourself, where we discuss news and views relevant to the African American community. As kicking off Black History Month, I'm honored to talk about the Black Panther Party, and our special guest is Robert Cosby. He's Assistant Dean of the School of Social Work at Howard University. Peace be with
Hey,
you. How you doing, Dr. Cosby?
well, thank you, Mr. Walker. I'm doing fine, thank you, and pleased to be here and to be with you.
What I wanted to discuss is the Black Panther Party. Um, it's like it started in actually in 1966 up until 1982. It was kind of dissolved, and it was a couple. But the initial organizers was Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. And if you would, you can kind of elaborate on how they got started.
Sure. Just to let you know, this is not my area of research, but it's an area that I've been both acquainted with as an African American male growing up, but also as someone that took an interest in understanding more about the Black Panthers and wanting to know more. I grew up in an era where Black Power was introduced as a way of being able to express yourself and the fist in the air with the Black Power and power to the people. Those were things that you learned as you were growing. But in addition to that, I think that the Panthers were really not revolutionary in a guerrilla warfare or in a negative sense, but in an area that many people don't try to or don't think of when we talk about civil rights. They really were very strong on advocacy and being able to do things for the Black community. And so many of my comments, I think, will share some of that, and I'll be glad to try and answer that. You were correct, and they really did get started in 1966, and there were a lot of people, talking about, the folks that really did a lot of stuff, Jones and Hampton, and a lot of people that Bobby Seals when we talk about things that really really were important to the movement. When I was younger, you had to read Soul on Ice. That was considered a
That's
big book
right.
that helped to shape things. But I'd like to take a different tack just for a moment to say that there were really a lot of women behind the Black Power movement
Ah,
and behind the Black Panthers. They were the ones that left college to be able to be involved. They were the ones that talked to young people in the community. It was not just a patriarchal perspective of the males being able to dominate what was going on with the Black Panther Party. That was revolutionary in terms of showing that the women had power. Many of them chose to be in the background and were willing to do the hard work, starting with the breakfast program for children, which was a very big thing across the country, particularly out on the West Coast and San Francisco and Oakland and in Chicago and parts of the Northeast and Philadelphia, New York, also in Boston. There were a lot of places around the country that were really uh, believing in the movement and what that stood for, and that it gave voice to Black people that they didn't have, and it served as sort of a counterpoint to what was going on with sort of the traditional civil rights movement of Martin Luther King. But it wasn't just that. I think that whether you look at Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. or look at folks like Bobby Seals and like Huey Newton, they were leaders, but it was the women behind them, as I say, with the breakfast programs. It was the women who enabled the folks to get enough money to be able to publish the newspapers that got them. And many of the people who did the writing for the newspapers were the women. They
That's
were the
right.
ones that worked on getting the icon of the Black Panther, which was shared widely, both internationally and locally and domestically in the United States. One of the big problems I think that the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover, who was the person in charge of the FBI for the longest time, um, I think he served longer than any other FBI leader has in the history of the FBI. He was a mastermind before computers of being able to develop information in ways that people could utilize. Um, a lot of people didn't know that Hoover got his start at the Library of Congress as a young guy.
Wow.
And, so he knew everything from the Dewey Decimal System that was used to actually use those little 3x5 index cards and 5x8 index cards to be able to provide information. And it was his way of being able to really change the way in which the FBI collected information. And that's what led to his rise to fame and to power. And he was known to have a dossier on everyone. And members of the Black Panther Party and members of the Civil Rights Movement were part of those files that he kept. It's not like now where you have everything in your smartphone and you keep that information there, and it's maybe in the cloud someplace that you can pull it down whenever you need to. You had hard copy, and he used that information to be able to provide very difficult um, pieces of information. And I do believe he was uh, almost paranoid about Black folk
Yes,
because what
I
he
agree.
saw was the opportunity for people to be able to organize and to come together and to actually see some things that some of the leaders were doing that no one else had done. And among those people, when I say things that no one else had done, I think of Fred Hampton and in the Chicago area. He was not initially from Chicago, but he moved there and was asked to sort of build up the Panther movement. When you look at his background, he started as a young guy, was always very charismatic. He got along with lots of different people. He was good at organizing. Give you an indication of that. He joined the NAACP youth program at like I think age 13 and was made a leader for folks at the NAACP. He did some things after that. So by the age of 18, they had, I think, identified something like 27,000 youth in parts of Chicago
Wow.
that were not, being well taken care of. In other words, they didn't have jobs as youth. They didn't have ways of being able to share information with each other. They were, you might say, ripe for gang involvement because there was no other way for them to do things. There weren't enough exercise programs, youth leagues or teams for them to join. And he joined with those 27,000 people that the NAACP had identified and got together like 500 individuals that were able to
Wow.
then become sort of the fulcrum for what became the Rainbow Coalition. What that was not Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson came later when we talk about the Rainbow Coalition. It
Okay.
was really, Fred Hampton and a
Wow.
guy named Jimenez. He just recently died. And they were the ones
Oh,
that really, got the Rainbow Coalition going in Chicago. And it was Fred's work with that, bringing together lots of different people and bringing together the Black Panther Party that a lot of folks knew him. And the reason I mentioned J. Edgar Hoover I believe, started with his work at the top in in convincing people at the state level, at the local level, that Black people were a menace to what was the rule of law and the order in which people should be done. And there was specific efforts to try and cut off the head of the organizations, and they would do that by a variety of things. But go ahead, you have questions.
Oh yeah. One thing I just wanted to mention was the leadership of the Black Panther Party and what happened and how they came after him. Um, you could jump in if I'm incorrect, but it seems like the Black Panther Party started in Oakland due to the abuse, the police brutality, and just the beatings and muggings and some cases rapes of in the Black community. And they came out. It's actually the Black Panther Party for Self Defense that was founded. In fact, it was very controversial because they actually went to Sacramento, the capital, and bearing arms. Because you had the right to bear arms, and that was just like you said, just the establishment just like freaked out. They can't have Black folks walking around America with, with black berets, leather jackets,
Yeah,
right behind. Even
boots. Yeah,
yeah, even though I mean the Ku Klux Klan, the White Citizen Council, uh, they do it
similar.
with
That's
impunity. That's right. I mean with
tremendous
impunity. I mean,
contrast and
yeah,
contextual pieces back for that day. So, just to sort of give you an understanding of that, from the Ku Klux Klan was at one point a national organization that was well respected, and at one time had a headquarters in downtown Washington D.C.
that's right.
in the 1920s. Um, Probably at that time they were the largest, one of the largest, I guess, advocacy groups that you would say of its type, and um, they had probably at its heyday somewhere between 300 and 500,000 members across the country. I always say it's not the ones you know, it's the ones you don't know. And
Oh,
so
no
I
doubt.
think that if you have that number of people who were card-carrying members, I don't know how many others were sympathizers, were people who were local but didn't want to pay their dues or do those kinds of things, but were sympathetic to the cause. Uh, for the Black Panther Party, I think that there were numerous people, not think, I believe that there were numerous people that had affinity for self-defense, for wanting to do things that did not ascribe to what was Martin Luther King's view of non-violent protest, and they were looking at from the standpoint of, if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back.
Exactly.
And that perspective resonated for some in the Black community. I'm not saying that it was something that was a great number of people, but I think that people, particularly people who have been able to see what slavery has done to Black people, have seen the Jim Crow South, have seen the new Jim Crow, have seen the view from the hood, have seen and not everyone, I don't want you to think that all Black people came from the hood. I'm not saying that at all.
Of
I'm
course.
saying that there were a lot of people that empathize and sympathize with the civil rights movement, starting with what happened to Emmett Till in 1955. Um, for those that don't know really what happened, it was only in the last few years that the women who basically said that he had said that Emmett Till at that time, I think a 14-year-old, had said bad things about her and had tried to be flirtatious or otherwise do something that would at that time was viewed as highly radical and offensive, and it got it got him killed, and it was his mother Mamie who said that after they dug the body out of the I believe the Tallahatchie River, that they would be able to have an open casket, and that open casket was attended by thousands and thousands of people in Chicago, Illinois, and it was printed by, at that time, this is before we had social media, long before that. The two major black newspapers or magazines that were popular in the day were Jet Magazine and Ebony Magazine, and
Right.
that funeral and the picture made the front page of those, or covers of those those two magazines, and they led to many other newspapers covering that story. And that was the jump start, I believe, for the civil rights movement as we now know it. Civil rights movement went largely from that time period up through the 1960s until approximately, you can argue, 1972. But some may say later than that. Some may say slightly earlier than that. But the point of the matter is that that was the movement. That was civil rights movement, was really what really was the catalyst for a lot of the benefits and things that have happened for African Americans in this country. Things like the Voting Rights Act. By the way, we have that maybe in jeopardy. We have to go back and look at that. The Civil Rights Act, a variety of pieces that relate to fair housing, relating to if you look at even the Americans with Disabilities Act, it was based in many ways on the Civil Rights Act.
Exactly.
So these are all pieces that you could argue that the Black Panthers had a role in serving, if not as the good cop, bad cop, or good person, bad person, that they were in that piece. And I had mentioned Fred Hampton because I think he was a charismatic leader, a little different. Huey Newton was also very charismatic. Um, I have a couple stories you may want to hear about that, but I think that they were very much part of the civil rights movement. And here we take the history of Carter Woodson and sort of recognizing Black people, and starting with Black Americans or Negro Americans, having a week and now a month that we celebrate. A lot of people would say that every day should be African American History Day.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I would argue that it isn't just African American History Day, week, or month. It is our American History Month. It is our American History Year. We contribute to the fabric that makes our land what it is, for good and bad, and we have contributed more for the good of this country than I think is given to us. But regardless, as they say about power, it is never given; it must be taken. And I
Right.
think that when you think about the Black Panther movement, that's how they started.
And as you just mentioned about Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, the local police, or actually reverberated throughout the country. They came after the Panthers, and I got a date of October 28th, 1967. The Minister of Defense, Huey Newton, he was involved in a shootout with the Oakland police, and one of the officers, Oakland police, John Frey, was killed. Huey Newton, he was wounded, and of course they took him to the hospital. And while he was wounded, I mean, he's wounded, he got a shot in the stomach. He was handcuffed, actually handcuffed, while you're in agony to the bed. I mean, like he's going to get away. But anyway, that was the beginning, of the attacks, the direct police. They tried to eradicate him. And then, like a few months after that, or in April '68, uh, Black Panther treasurer, young Bobby Hutton, he was killed. In the raid, he was shot unarmed. He was also with Eldridge Cleaver, was the chairman or spokesperson. And Eldridge Cleaver came out of the basement of where they were at, naked, so they couldn't see he had a weapon. And Bobby Hutton didn't necessarily want to do that, but when he came out, he was shot 8 times. He was just
Right.
murdered just right,
And
just
and
right there.
Eldridge Cleaver's Soul on Ice was the sort of the catalyst that talked about a lot of that. And so when you talk about these were largely young people, 17 to 24, 25 years old. We know from our science and biology that the brain is not fully developed until about age 26, 25, 26. So these are young people who were working to do things that a lot of other groups were not willing to do. They were willing to take what resources they had, live in situations that weren't necessarily the best, but to be part of a movement, to be part of something larger than themselves. So when you think about, what is a problem with why, little black kids, boys and girls were not able to learn was they were hungry. And so they didn't get enough to eat. So by starting a breakfast program, they were ensuring that the kids had enough food so that they then could concentrate on learning. And that
Exactly.
was a big piece to say, okay, if you can learn, then you can learn about a lot of important things that will help the community, help yourself, and be able to contribute to that, whether it be economically, whether it be in terms of knowledge, and they borrowed from the African tradition. They borrowed from the Communist Party. They borrowed from pieces that a lot of folks would say, as Americans and democracy, you shouldn't consider those things. But they said their perspective from the view from many of the leaders from the Black Panthers was that um, we tried it your way for a while, and look, we got the last 375, 400 years that have not worked for us. So we're going to consider something else. And many of them thought the best way was to educate. And so when I mentioned, folks like Eldridge Cleaver, like Huey Newton, like Bobby Seals, they started in the mornings with their political education that would be like 6, 7 in the morning. They would have like an hour of having to learn, and I think there were like 16 principles to their that each
That's
person
true.
had to learn, and those principles will help to show them. And when you rose in the Panther Party, you had to use that language to show that you knew what you were talking about, and they would, quiz you on that information, and that's how they were able to sustain folks. I knew a number of people in parts over my adult life. Growing up, I used to ask my dad about the Black Panthers and what was going on, and he said, you should always be educated and understand as much as you possibly can, but you need to stay away from that. And I said, well, why is that, Dad? He said, because you get labeled and there are bad things that happen to folks. And I'm like, well, you were in the military, Dad. What are you talking about? He said, they lie, they tell a lot of stuff. And I said, people lie? The police, the people, they lie? What are you talking about, Dad? He said, you have no idea. And, and if you're going to question me on that, you better come with some information. Otherwise, get out of my face. And that was kind of how he looked at it. But he had the right perspective, I think, because, and by the way, he was a Green Beret Pathfinder. So he had lots of black berets at home. And I had managed to, grab one of those, and I thought I was going to be something. I'd go out, show I had my black beret on. They didn't know whether it was because I was a military person or whether I was a Black Panther supporter. But he caught me out one of he said, "What the hell are you doing, son?" And I was like, "Dad, I'm just going to." He goes, "Take it off." He said, "You earned that." He said, "You haven't earned it." And he meant hadn't earned it from the military standpoint, hadn't earned it from the Panther standpoint. So I didn't wear it, but as I say, I was always interested in seeing what was going to happen. Yeah, I said I'd share two quick stories. One was
Sure.
when I was in my work at Howard University School of Social Work. I was teaching a policy class, and one of my students was saying, we were doing the introductions, she said, "I'm from Oakland, California." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "So you know a little bit about what's happening in the community?" She says, "Oh, I know a lot." And I was like, "You do? Okay. So what kind of things are you talking about?" She said, "Well, my dad was a Black Panther. And I said, okay, so you know a little bit about the movement. She said, we raised money, we wrote newspapers,
Wow.
she said, when I was a kid, I mean, I was really, I'm talking hardly out of my toddler years, 4, 5, 6 years old. Every night or every other night, there was somebody from the Black Panthers at my living room. And I said, oh yeah? I said, like who? And she said, you know, all of them. I said, all of who? She said, Huey Newton. And she just ran down about 4 or 5 names. And I was like, you knew them? She said, yeah, they always used to tell me it's time for me to go to bed. And then they'd start talking. I'd be listening in and hearing what they were talking about. And I was like, okay, so here you are at the School of Social Work. What's your interest? What are your plans? She said, well, um, I want to go back to my community and help them because all the things that were back happening in Oakland at that time were still happening. Now she's been gone for 4 or 5 years after graduation now, but the point was she wanted to give back because that was in her blood. It was in her nature to want to do that. Panther movement has certainly stopped. There's been a couple of efforts to sort of reinvigorate it at various places, but the leadership and the style in which it was able to flourish was dependent on charismatic leaders, dependent on people being able to interact directly with people, being able to provide speeches that people can go to the actual rally where that was taking place. And those times have largely gone in part because of technology, in part because we haven't had the emerging leaders that have been willing to make that sacrifice. Some of them made the ultimate sacrifice where they did this work and they were killed for it. And the reason I mentioned J. Edgar Hoover was he, in many ways, mandated that state and local police uh, take no prisoners, that they would shoot first and then take names later. And they killed a lot of people. And you might argue that the story, give you an example. I heard you mention about the counterintelligence work that happened in Chicago that essentially dealt the death blow for the Black Panther movement in Chicago by killing, uh, Fred Hampton. And Fred was a charismatic leader, was, as I mentioned, had provided a lot of things from a young age. And they were worried not because of what he was doing with the Black Panthers, but he was uniting groups that previously were um, enemies of the police and were getting them to put down their weapons and look at what he said was, we will never be free of poverty until we stop fighting with one another. And the only way that we're going to do that is to be able to work together and to join. And so he got coalitions of groups that no one said could work together. And they were sitting down and eating meals together and talking about strategies and what they were going to do. Some of these groups were folks that were, like the Blackstone Rangers, who were heavy into, drugs and
Gangster, dang.
prostitution and a lot of stuff. And I mean, you could easily get yourself killed in Chicago in certain areas um, by what you said or the way you even looked at someone. Um, and so those things changed with Fred, and people like J. Edgar Hoover were afraid of those things, and they had right to be afraid because I think had they were getting interest from people internationally who were looking at the model that the Black Panthers were using and saying maybe we should learn some things from them, and they came and talked to some folks. Um, People you'd be surprised that knew something about the Black Panthers, like the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, and they didn't get along too well with British government for good reason.
Right.
For good reason. If you look at the history of oppression in this country, there was some of that oppression in Ireland, and so they were looking at generations of oppression and saying there's things perhaps could be done a little differently. So the Black Panther Party had some I think cachet from people around the world, but I think they also had some good ways in which people were able to look at information in a different way.
And looking at the leadership, as I mentioned, Huey Newton, of course, went to trial for the murder of the officer John Fray. It was actually a shootout. They acquitted him of murder, but they charged him with involuntary manslaughter. I mean, so he was got sentenced to like 2 to 15 years in prison. So
And
that
after he got out, he was largely a very different person.
right. But what I want to mention, yeah, he a lot of things changed when you were in prison, but that when he was in, I remember, being young, back then, that kind of generated activism around the country, the Free Huey, that
Yeah,
everywhere, even on Howard's campus,
yeah. You
Free
could
Huey, Free
provide a few
Huey.
dollars, and they would supposedly go to the right spot to help out with
Right.
his everything from his legal campaign to his information about the programs and about the Panther Party.
So I
Um,
mean that kind of galvanized the Panther Party because it spread, to a lot of the major cities, like New York, Philadelphia. But that wasn't the only attacks on him. Of course, we already mentioned of what happened with Bobby Hutton, but then Bobby Seale actually went to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago,
yeah,
and
68.
it was it was a big protest because so all the activists, were revolution activists were there. So Bobby Seale got thrown in with the Weathermen and some other groups accused of inciting a
The
riot because he
SDS,
was,
right,
and he didn't even give a speech, as I remember. He was there, but he
right.
didn't say go do anything. And he
They
went
were they were using
around.
the billy clubs to get their attention when they
Oh,
got out.
it was
Yeah,
brutal. So he was incarcerated, and then about a year later is when they murdered Fred Hampton. It wasn't just like murdered. It's like I'm not sure if it was between 20 and 30 officers, but they said it was like a few hundred shots fired into a small apartment, and his wife was there. Yeah, I mean,
his
and she,
girlfriend at the time,
right,
right.
girl, okay, but a common
She's
law,
now
whatever.
become a
Yeah,
she has an African name now, but I
right,
think her name was Laura.
right. It
Her,
was
her
Laura.
their son is now also an activist. He's about age 55.
Right.
But he was born, she was 8.5 months pregnant when I think they said 99 to 100 shots or 95, 90 to 99 shots.
It's more. It's a couple hundred. I mean, you really the whole apartment. They just literally destroyed the apartment just to murder
Right.
him, and
They, my
with
point
just
was they
bluntly.
agreed that it was 99, something between 90 and 99, but there were two groups, one that came to the front door and one
Right.
that went to the back of the apartment, and they shot through the south wall, which was where the bed was. But we hosted an event that was co-hosted an event at the School of Social Work that was, I believe, the African American History program, and
Okay.
they talked about and had members of the Black Panther Party and members from SNCC that were there, and they told some of the stories that have largely been in classified documents that you can't get your hands on, but that the Mr. Haas, who was the lawyer for a number of the folks with the party, the Black Panther Party, he was sharing with folks what was considered information that no one was supposed to have, which pointed out how the authorities, the FBI, the state police, the local police lied and didn't do what they were supposed to.
Of
And
course.
when you go back and look at it, you find out that there was a guy named William O'Neill, Bill O'Neill, who was, a plant. And the reason he was a plant was
The
he was going
Judas.
to go to prison for a long time for boosting cars and interstate theft. And so they told him he would have a felony record, and but if he went and did this work, that they would remove all of his felony charges and they'd give him a stipend every year. And so he was like, "Yeah, I'll do that." And so he was the when they say the inside man that did the terrible things, he was the guy that did did terrible things and reported on them, and he managed to become the bodyguard for Fred Hampton, and he's the one that I think put some secobarbital, which is a barbiturate, to make him sleep in his drink during dinner, and he apparently was so sedated that there was no way he was ever going to get out of the way of any bullets. And
Right.
as
Right.
the members said during the time at the School of Social Work at Washington, D.C.'s Howard University campus, they said, main campus, they said that he barely lifted his head off the pillow. He was so sedated while they were shooting, and he had been shot in the shoulder, but had not been killed. And one of the people said when they were supposed to be bringing the people out that Hampton was still alive, and uh, one of the guys who was supposed to be a special unit for the Chicago police said, I'll take care of it. And he went back in, and people were reported to have heard two more shots. And apparently, there were two shots that were shot to his head. So it was the two shots that finally killed him. But the point I'm making is that these were almost all areas of action that were orchestrated by J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI. And he had immense power, and he used it with capricious and in some cases arbitrary manners.
Well, I mean, this not just arbitrary. Hoover was like a forerunner of the American Gestapo. Let's keep it real. I mean, and not just the Panthers. He the one that sent hundreds of death threats to Dr. King. Probably was complicit in the assassination of Dr. King. Probably complicit in the assassination of Malcolm X. I've even say go far and say Medgar Evers. I mean, I think Hoover was lauded these murders. I mean,
I agree,
and
and
I wouldn't be surprised if he was
I
behind all of
yeah, I bristle at the just the comparison to the Gestapo because I think that's a different thing. But I will say this: the
them.
Nazi
Okay, okay,
uh, Party, which stands for Nationalist Party, many people didn't know
right,
that in
right.
Germany.
National
And,
Socialist,
and,
right?
and so we talk about the National Party and we talk about populism in this country. And we talk about folks that applaud dictators and their lifestyle. And we have to acknowledge that some of these things may look a lot like the things that appeared in the 1930s and 40s. But
Oh, exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
I mean, for first of all, let's be keep it real that I mean Hoover just he wasn't just like you know, an independent maniac that he was. He was just, he just fanatic with his racism. But it was like, the establishment turned a blind eye. I mean, they didn't want to see that type of activism in the African American community. I mean, they didn't. None. It was reported, and
yes,
it was reported because it was so blatant. I mean, they like they did with the New York 21, they raided the offices and shot up that office in New York. I think it was Manhattan, and just snatched everybody out of there and accused them of shooting at the police. Now you bust in there, with machine guns or whatever, and accused them of shooting at the police because they just want to make inquiry. So I mean, this was
right.
orchestrated, and the sad thing about it is, you know, they went to court. I think William Kunstler got most of the New York 21 off, but it just sabotaged the movement. Everybody's in
And
jail.
and
Uh,
if you
I,
read that information that Hoover put out when he talked to people, he really was making the case for why he was able to do things that other people were not. And he used his power. That's what I was saying about arbitrary and capricious, and that he used the power in a way that really his whole goal was to remove any authority and or leadership in the
a
black
messiah.
community.
What do you call it?
And
What
so,
do you
and
call
so
a
if you
messiah?
did that, you would hurt black folks economically in communities. You would increase
I'm
the
reading it.
level of violence in communities because you wouldn't have a rule of law because the leadership was not there. You would create a level of fear in which people were saying, I have to have a weapon to protect myself, which some cases was true. But it also was a way in which we as a people have had a problem historically, as I mentioned, going back to slavery, moving forward, where every time or many times we are very successful, that success is contrasted with people that don't have anything, which is a false equivalent, because it may mean that you started out with very little, may mean that you had some and you added to it, or in some cases, very few, may mean that you actually were given the silver spoon and you were able to build from there. But the point of the matter is nobody takes that melanin out of our skin, and we look the same as far as everyone is concerned. And whether it's the one drop rule that they used to use, or whether it was the perspective of the darker you are, the more hostility things would follow you. And I think that many people outside of the Black community have come to understand that we as a people are not considered the same as whites and will not be for some time.
Of course not.
I think of the comment that the great novelist James Baldwin said. He said, "I may not." He said, "When people come to this country, they may not know who they want to be, but they know they don't want to be Negro."
Exactly.
So, and for that, that was what they used to say about, that was what blacks were called in his time. And by the way, that
Right.
was up through the 60s. If you ever read The Fire Next Time, it
Yeah.
talks about a lot of the pieces that were happening in
Oh,
community.
excellent, excellent book. That was
Yeah.
excellent. But it wasn't just Bobby Seale and Fred Hampton. I mean, the other spokesperson, other people were involved with the Panthers, and like David Hilliard was kind of like under assault, was trying to keep it together. But Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Afoe, he left the
Yeah.
country, because they were coming there, they were coming to get him.
So you mentioned Tume, what Stokely Carmichael was
Right,
before he
right,
changed his name.
right,
So a lot of people didn't know that Stokely Carmichael was very smart. He was a charismatic guy from high school. He got a scholarship to come to Howard University from New York City. He's originally from Trinidad.
right.
Um, a very affable, likable guy. Decided that he was going to help with the civil rights movement with the Freedom Riders, and he took a Greyhound bus with the rest of folks down to places in the South, and he was in
Mississippi.
Mississippi, and was working on getting voter registration. He was very successful in getting people to become organized and to get people registered to vote. And he wanted to see the success of his efforts by staying until actual elections through November. So he decided that after having worked over the summer, that he was going to essentially take a semester off to be able to finish doing that work. Um, he stayed, and the Klan targeted him, and they beat the crap out of him and left him for dead. He spent over a month. I don't remember the exact number of days, but it was a
Something
long
like that.
time in the hospital, and then had to convalesce for a longer period. Now, let me ask you a question. If somebody had beaten the crap out of you, do you think you'd be the same person afterwards?
Um,
Probably not.
well, it depends. I mean, because I don't want to talk about my personal situation, but I wasn't hospitalized, but I was assaulted by the police, and that just made me even more angry. I mean,
There's my point. And more determined, right?
exactly. I mean, it's like you
And
can't. What are you
so
gonna do
they
about
said
that
that
shit?
as a result of that, with Carmichael Toomey, that he became more radicalized afterwards,
That's
where he
right.
said, the answer is not getting the education in school. The education that I got is what we need to be aware of. And that's where he started talking about things that were viewed by the white establishment as not acceptable. Before then, he was willing to go along, but he was also willing to make certain that people understood. And he was a very good speaker, a handsome guy. A lot of people liked him. A lot of the ladies liked him on the Howard campus, from what I've read. And he was very successful at what he did.
Well, he
Um,
helped found the student a SNCC, Student
right,
Nonviolent Coordinating
Nonviolent
Committee,
Coordinating
and
Council. Yes,
and he
coordinating committee.
and well, actually, it was Willie Ricks, because I met him and Willie Ricks, being at Howard. And anyway, I mean, not as old as he was, but anyway, Willie Ricks mentioned Black Power in the meeting, and then Stokely got it in a press conference and said, one thing we also need is Black Power, and that just like scared the B
And that
jabbers.
took that, and that's what I was going to
That
come
scared the
to.
B jabbers out of the establishment. Like, what? What?
That scared people.
Yeah,
And you might say that
that's
the
good though. That was
argument
good.
that helped in solidifying the deaths of Malcolm X, of Martin Luther King, and
That's right.
others. Carmichael didn't die that way. He died of cancer complications. But
Well, he
but
went to Africa. He stayed, but
exactly,
he came back a couple of times.
yeah,
He
he
came back.
did.
Yeah.
But he was never the same person in that respect. Uh,
Oh,
but
true. That's true.
but my point was is that much of the establishment has been able to change the way in which uh, Black people are able to organize, able to think, able to build on generational wealth. This is something that I work on as I look at social isolation, which is an area that I study and research. The aspect related to those things has everything to do with our history and the way in which we've been able to survive. And from the Black Panther Party, we can see that, if you look at Huey Newton, he was in many ways kind of a broken man as he got older. He became addicted to drugs. He had a lot of complications related to this. Was a guy who women would look at him and say, "Oh man, I got to see this guy." And he would, was very charismatic, would be able to, and that was probably very much a patriarchal and, many ways a very chauvinistic perspective that he had. And, we all think about what we might have looked like or been able to accomplish or do when we were younger persons. But, the Panther Party in its day was radical in some respects, but quite revolutionary in other ways because of what it was doing positively for the Black community. It wasn't
Exactly.
about the guns. It wasn't about it was the fact that they were using language and ways of looking at things that were empowering the community in ways that MLK and Martin Luther King, when I say that, MLK, but also Malcolm X were using to recognize that it's about class, it's about economic empowerment, it's about being able to do things for our community. And when people were talking about boycotts and doing things, and organizing not just trash collectors, but organizing a variety of other groups and saying, "Hey, if we don't buy bus tickets, we don't do the same things that go to these stores, we boycott those things." Guess what? Those stores might not make it. And guess what?
That's
We
right.
can use that power to build those same things in our own community as opposed to. And so that's the power that folks like J. Edgar Hoover and others were afraid of.
Right.
And I think it was a realistic fear. And when you look at it and you look back on the history and you look at what we have now, we look at gun violence, another area that I work in. You look at some of the things that we have been forced to have to do in our communities, and you come to see that the communities, even with the technology, we are, turning inward as opposed to building ourselves, our communities to be able to uh, take on those opportunities in different ways.
You talked about the path to be revolutionary. I just want to, well, also scared the establishment. I just want to briefly mention the 10-point program that stood at the foundation of the Black Panther Party. They said, we want freedom. We're empowered to determine the destiny of our Black community. We want full employment for our people. We want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our black community. We want decent housing, fit for shelter and human beings. We want education for our people that exposes the nature of the decadent American society. We want all black men to be exempt from military service. We want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black people. We want freedom for all black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons. We want all black people to be brought to trial, be tried in court by a jury of their peers, peer group, or people from their black communities as defined by the Constitution of the United States. And you want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, peace, and justice. I mean that's radical. You know, I mean
As I said, as I said, correct.
that's super radical. I mean to say
Yeah.
that's the goal. You know, especially
Yeah.
exempt from military service, of black
Well,
black
I
black
could get
jury.
behind all those, and when you get to talk about that, it's like, well, let's think about how that would work. But I think the truth of the matter is, it got a lot of people's attention.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I think that when they looked at Mao Zedong, for example, and his, great walk to free the people, which was not so much about freeing the people, but by getting everyone to go along with what he had put in place with the Communist Party, and that little red book that he talked about. If you had a red book in the United States, you were considered radical. And
Exactly.
people, if they had a copy of that red book, they kept it close,
Right.
so that people didn't necessarily know about. The folks at the Black Panther Party pulled out the book and started reading pieces of it and changing some of the documents that they were looking at to say, this is a good point. We're going to include this in what we're doing. Now, was that meant for hype, or was that meant to really help the community? I think that the goals probably for everyone were not the same, but I think that it did get a lot of attention, some unwanted attention, but they forced the issue that MLK had been working on for many years. So there's a cauldron of change that was really being developed at that time, and that was continuing to build over time. And I think that was what made that really, really important.
And just mention one of the last things to say about the COINTELPRO program is anything to disrupt the Black Panthers. We mentioned the murders, arresting people, the mass, the conservation of all the leadership. The Hudlin brothers did an excellent documentary. They used some excerpts from COINTELPRO that were declassified. Anyway, um, Huey and Eldridge Cleaver, you mentioned earlier, they Eldridge left. He went to Algeria and different things. They didn't come back. I mean, they was killing people. And but Huey got out actually. Um, this last trial was like 70, 71. And he was changed. I mean, he was in solitary confinement, all during his
Right.
incarceration. And that, I'm telling you, there's no telling what they were doing to them. I mean, we already heard about what they did in Abu Ghraib in Iraq, the sound deprivation, sleep deprivation. And I mean, that's mentally, I mean, come on, that's talk about a beating, that's not mentally, I think that did something to him. But it was sad because in the documentary, he got into it with Eldridge because Eldridge wasn't there. Eldridge was talking about some kind of meeting, and Huey called him a punk. I mean, because I mean, just
And that's
it
what I
it,
meant
it,
about
it, was, it was so
creating
sad.
the
It was so
internal
sad.
problems. Yes.
Right. It was almost brought tears to my eye to see him go at it like that. And one thing they did, it was crazy. They had cameras everywhere. I mean, cameras in bathrooms and whatnot. So what they did, they caused a rift between the East Coast and West Coast Panthers. They mentioned that one guy was trying to talk to somebody in the East. I can't remember the name. His old lady. And then they mentioned because they had cameras in the bathroom, she had like a birthmark on her thigh. So they mentioned that the guy, he didn't even say it. They said he saw something about the birthmark. So then the East Coast guy said that he might have had relations with the lady. And
Right.
they actually were, shooting each other, trying to, over I mean, that's
And
utterly
those are the
ridiculous.
same things.
Utterly ridiculous.
I had a monograph that we published at the School of Social Work recently on gun violence, and you'd be surprised at the number of issues that relate to youth and gun violence that start in that same way. You were looking at my special person a different way, or you disrespected me because you stepped on my shoes, or
Yeah.
I didn't like the way you cut in line, and therefore, and if you know anything about what happens in prisons, one of the quickest ways to get hurt and or killed is one to try and talk or do something to that significant other for that person, and that may mean your cellmate or whoever you cohabitate with. It may mean that you cut in line, where you say you're at the chow line, and instead of you lining up at everyone, you try and cut in line. Those kind of things get you killed or get you hurt very badly. And you
It's a
know,
tragedy.
it's a tragedy that many of these are people of color, largely African American, who are in this situation. But when we talk about the schools to prison pipeline, you see how that happens. You see the way in which we, as people, turn on each other. When you put us into overcrowded areas, you take away
A
resources.
cage. It's a cage.
And that cage mentality will hurt people. And so the question that we must be asking is, how do we heal our communities? We're preparing a conference that we're doing. We have a number of co-sponsors that we're looking at doing something in April, where we're looking
Okay.
at April of 25, where we're looking right now at ways in which we can work with youth, work with older persons, work with adults in ways that have not been done in concert. Often we do our own thing, but we don't necessarily come together. And so, if we can look at ways in which we can come together, I think it would be beneficial. But we're looking, groups that we've been partners with our multidisciplinary gerontology center, working with 100 Fathers, working with some of our programs at the university, through our various initiatives, working with some of the like Prince George's
Okay.
uh, school system, particularly Flowers School. We have an internship program where we're trying to look at ways in which we can help change that. So this opportunity is much appreciated, but it's also one where when you talk about the Panthers, you have to talk about our history. And when you talk
Exactly.
about our history as a country, we get to the piece where we build from Carter Woodson and talking about, why we want to bring attention to who we are. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's not that other history and other lives don't matter too.
Of
It's
course.
that there's been a disproportionate misrepresentation, annihilation in some respects of
Exactly.
black folks. And as we see it happen with a lot of black males, we have to recognize what that means when you remove leaders in families, and what it means to remove leaders in communities. And then we look at how those communities behave, how people behave. Children grow up without a father or grow up with different experiences, can be quite difficult. And so
Exactly.
these are things that we're trying to think about, work on, and working with the College of Medicine, some folks there, and some other places to try and look at ways in which we can do that. We want to continue to build on that with Flowers High School and their internship program, and working with, we have some people, I won't call out names right now, but we have a number of people that we're trying to build on the successes that have been there, smaller successes, larger successes, but know that we stand on the shoulders of people that have gone before. So we'll keep trying to work on those things.
I think it's very commendable. I mean, if you I know you work with engineer Mr. Smith, but I think that's a very notable goal to have that conference in April. I like to. I mean, maybe we could attend. Even if I can't attend, I mean, I know people. Of course, I have family in the area. I like for them to attend, and maybe Brother Smith can, maybe document, some of the workshops of what you're going to have, because that's kind of like the legacy of what the Panther, what you're doing. We got to reach out to the entire communities, not just, I mean, Du Bois talked about the town to 10th. but it takes everybody. I mean, like you mentioned about the sisters who did the grunt work, and from you're 1,000% correct because the so-called progressive groups, organizations I've been in, community and you know, organization with Kwame Afo, the sisters did 90% of the work, and the brothers did 90% of the talking. I'm just keeping it real. I mean, even in where I'm from, and Smith and I'm from Buffalo, New York, community organization, a couple community organizations there. One notable one being Bill. They did all the work. They called out about it. If it was the meeting, you got like multiple phone calls. It wasn't no internet or anything like that. You got calls. They left a message on your answer machine. I mean, it's they did the grunt. They did the grunt work. I mean, there was Elaine Brown. She was actually a high ranking. I think she was of a minister of propaganda and communications in the Panthers. But we gotta have everybody involved. It's not a chauvinist thing. It's not just pass me the paper, copy, put those copies in there for me. But they did a lot of, like you said, strategic planning. The sisters did a lot of work, and it's notable. And even the support. I mean, people in the community supported the Panthers. I mean, even some of the churches they kept it on the low because of what's going on. But what you're doing is very commendable with that conference. So uh, through Brother Smith, just keep us informed, and I mean that's notable. I mean, I appreciate your efforts. Something else, but unless you had anything else to add, I mean, this has been a excellent discussion. I mean, I appreciate the stories. I mean, those are kind of enlightening what we talked about. But if you anything else to add, I guess I'm gonna check with Brother Smith. You and Karen have any questions or any comments you wanted to make?
I don't know that. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you so much. This was more than wonderful and a great way to start out our history celebration. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Uh, Dr. Cosby, once again, I think we want to revisit with you again because you mentioned some issues. My son was on, he's an educator, and we talked about the family and the, I don't want to say disillusion of the black family, but certainly the impact of the black family. You know, mothers trying to raise men and single parents and the disillusion, everything's on the phone. So I think if you're available, maybe in about 8 to 10 weeks, I'd like to get you back on to discuss, the black family. You said you done some work, in isolation, and I was at the school of social work. Actually, I majored in sociology. I was gonna attend, but some other things came up. I wish I had, but if you would please, let us keep in touch with you, and we want to bring you back, like I said, in about 4 to 6 weeks, because we do want to have a discussion about the black family.
Be glad to consider it. May want to consider a podcast that I do, which is
Okay.
called uh, Grand Stories, Profiles in Aging. You can find it on
Oh,
Spotify or wherever you get your podcast information. But it's a good way to understand the contributions of older persons and some of whom have done very important work in Black communities, some of whom have done things over the history of their work, and some who are still at work.
oh
And
wow.
so, but it
All right.
profiles many older persons. I'm a gerontologist by background as well, and so I look at the overall experience and look at the contextual issues associated with that. So,
All
thank you
right.
very much, Mr. Walker, for the opportunity to talk. Look forward to
Thank,
next.
thank you, bro. I appreciate that, and thank you for visiting with us. Social communications presents express yourself. Thank you very much. Peace be with.